There are things that happen to a man that he spends the rest of his life trying to explain, not to other people, but to himself, in the quiet moments before sleep, when the day is done and there is nothing left to hide behind. This is one of those things. I have been trying to explain it to myself for 15 years now, and I have not fully succeeded, and I have come to believe that maybe some things are not meant to be explained. Maybe some things are just meant to be carried, and the carrying of them, honestly and without pretending they are something smaller than they are, is the only decent thing you can do with them. Her name was Ada. I want to say that first because her name is the beginning of everything, and because I have said it in my head every day for 15 years, and it still sounds the same as it did the first time I heard it. Ada. 2 syllables that somehow contain an entire world. I was 28 years old in the spring of 1880, and I had been working cattle in Presidio County for 6 years, first for other men, and then on my own small operation on 40 acres east of Marfa. I was not rich, and I was not particularly ambitious, and I was, by most honest measures, content, not happy in any burning way, but settled, the way a man gets settled when the work is good, and the land is familiar, and the days have a rhythm that holds him. I did not know there was anything missing. That is the thing about a life before it gets turned over. It feels complete from the inside, even when it is not. I met her on a Wednesday in April at the general store in Marfa. She was buying flour and I was buying coffee, and we reached for things on the same shelf at the same moment, and her hand brushed mine, and she said, "Excuse me," and I said it was no trouble, and she smiled, and that was it. That was the whole of the first meeting. 2 minutes, maybe 3, a few words about nothing, and a smile that I thought about for the entire ride home and for most of the night after. She was perhaps 25, with dark hair and brown eyes that had a quality of warmth that you do not encounter very often. Not the performed warmth of a person trying to make you feel welcome, but the real kind, the kind that comes from a person who is genuinely interested in the world and in the people they find in it. She was not the most beautiful woman I had ever seen. She was something better than that. She was the kind of woman whose face you want to keep looking at, not because of how it is arranged, but because of what is happening in it. Because there is always something happening in it, always some thought or feeling passing through that is worth watching. I found out her name from the store owner, which I am not proud of, but which I did, and I found out other things along with it that I should have found out before I spent a week thinking about a smile. She was married. She had been married for 3 years to a man named Robert Caswell, who ran a freight operation out of Marfa, and who was, by all accounts, a decent enough man who worked hard and treated his wife well. They had come to Marfa from San Antonio the previous year, and they lived on the south side of town in a house with a blue door that I rode past twice in the following week without stopping, which told me something about myself that I was not ready to examine directly. The decent thing, the obvious thing, the thing that any man with a clear head and a functioning conscience would have done, was to let it go. A smile in a general store from a married woman was not a thing that required any response except the acknowledgement that some things are not available to you, and the moving on from that acknowledgement with your dignity intact. I knew this. I was not a man without a conscience, and I was not a man who made a habit of wanting things that belonged to other people. But there is a difference between knowing the decent thing and being able to do it, and the difference is the size of the thing you are trying to let go of. and what I was trying to let go of was apparently larger than I had the strength for at 28 years old in the spring of 1880. I saw her again 3 weeks later at the same store, because Marfa was a small town and the general store was where everyone went, and the laws of a small town being what they are, two people who have met once will meet again before they meet strangers. She recognized me. She said hello with the warmth that I had been thinking about for 3 weeks, and I said hello back, and we talked about nothing, about the spring weather and the price of cattle and the road conditions east of town, for perhaps 10 minutes. And in those 10 minutes, I understood something that I had been trying to avoid understanding, which was that she felt it too, whatever it was. The pull of it, the specific quality of attention that two people pay to each other when something is happening between them that neither of them has acknowledged and both of them know is there. We did not say anything about it. We said goodbye, and I rode home, and she went about her day, and both of us, I imagine, spent the evening trying to be sensible about something that was not being sensible about us. The thing about a small town is that it does not cooperate with avoidance. You cannot avoid someone in a town of 400 people without making the avoidance itself obvious, without turning the not seeing into a thing as visible as the seeing would have been. So I did not avoid her, and she did not avoid me. And over the course of May and June, we talked at the store and at community gatherings, and once on the street when we were both walking in the same direction for half a block. And each time we talked, the conversation went a little deeper and lasted a little longer. And the thing between us that we were not naming got a little larger and a little harder to pretend was not there. Her husband was away for stretches of time. His freight operation took him out of Marfa for days, and sometimes a week at a stretch. And when he was gone, Ida spent time with the women of the town in the way that wives of traveling men learn to spend time, building the female friendships that sustain a person through the long stretches of absence. She was good at this. She was the kind of person people wanted to be around, and she had made real friends in Marfa in the year she had been there. I was not her friend in that category. I was something else, something neither of us had assigned a name to, and the not naming of it was the most dishonest thing I had been part of since I was old enough to know better. It was a Thursday evening in July when it finally became something that could no longer pretend to be nothing. There was a gathering at the Alderman Ranch, the kind of summer evening gathering that happened when the weather was dry, and the community needed a reason to be together. And Ada was there, and I was there, and somewhere in the middle of the evening, we found ourselves at the edge of the gathering, away from the noise and the lamplight, standing near the fence at the far end of the yard, with the stars coming out above us and the flat land dark and enormous beyond the fence, and nothing between us except the air and everything we had not said. She spoke first. She said my name, just my name, Will, the way she said it when she was being direct about something. And then she said, "I think you know that I am not going to do anything about this." And I said I knew. And she said, "I need you to know that it is not because I do not feel it." And I said I knew that too. And we stood at the fence for a while after that without saying anything, side by side in the dark, looking at the stars above the flat Texas land. And it was the most honest and the most painful 10 minutes of my life up to that point. Then she said, "I made a promise." And I said, "I know you did." And she said, "I am not the kind of person who breaks promises." And I looked at her when she said that, and I believed her completely. which was one of the things I loved about her, that her word was a real thing, a load-bearing thing, not something she offered lightly or withdrew when the weight became inconvenient. She had made a promise to a man who had done nothing wrong, and she was going to keep it, and she was telling me this clearly and directly because she was the kind of woman who believed that the people in a situation deserved to understand the situation honestly, rather than being managed toward a conclusion by someone else's careful silences. I said, I respect that. And I meant it. She looked at me for a long moment in the dark, the lamplight from the gathering catching the edge of her face and making her eyes bright, and she said, I am sorry that we met. And I said, I am not. And that was the truest thing I said to her in the whole of the time I knew her. We walked back to the gathering separately, and we were both perfectly ordinary for the rest of the evening, and nobody noticed anything because there was nothing visible to notice, which was the thing about Ada. She could feel something enormous and give nothing away on the outside, which I admired, and which also, in that moment, cost me something to watch. I did not sleep that night. I lay in the dark of my ranch house on the east side of Marfa, and I looked at the ceiling, and I thought about promises and about the kind of person who keeps them, even when keeping them is the hardest thing available. And I thought about what it meant that I had met someone who was exactly the person I had been looking for, without knowing I was looking for anyone, and that she was not available and was never going to be available, and had told me so directly and honestly and with more grace than the situation required. I thought about leaving Marfa. I want to be honest about that. The thought came, and I sat with it. I could move the cattle operation, find a different 40 acres in a different county, put enough distance between myself and a woman I could not have, that the distance would eventually do the work that my will could not do on its own. This was sensible. This was what a man with a clear head would do. I did not do it. I am not entirely proud of this, but I am going to tell it honestly. I stayed because leaving felt like a different kind of dishonesty, like admitting that I could not be in the same town as a woman without that being a problem, which felt like a statement about my character that I was not willing to make. I told myself I could be in Marfa and be decent about it, and I believed this was true, and I also understood that I was telling myself this partly because I was not ready to put 40 acres of Texas between myself and the possibility of seeing her on a Wednesday in the general store. The summer went on. We were careful with each other in the way of two people who have acknowledged something and decided not to act on it. Pleasant, friendly, no longer lingering in conversation, no longer standing at fences in the dark. We had drawn a line, and we both stayed on our side of it, and the line held. And the holding of it was its own kind of intimacy, because only the two of us knew it was there. Robert came back from a long run in August, and I met him properly for the first time at a gathering at the end of the month. He was a large man with an open face and a direct handshake, and he talked about freight routes and road conditions with the enthusiasm of a man who genuinely loved his work, and he was kind to Ada in the easy, uncomplicated way of a man who loves his wife and is not troubled by it. He was not a villain. I want to say that clearly because it matters. He was a good man who had done nothing wrong and who deserved better than to be the obstacle in another man's private story. I liked him, which was its own particular difficulty, because it is easier to be resigned about a thing when the person standing in the way of it is easy to dislike. September came, and with it the understanding that something was going to have to change, because the thing I had been carrying since April was not getting lighter with time. I had believed, in July, that the conversation at the fence would settle something, would close a door in a way that allowed me to accept the closing and move forward. What it had actually done was open something, because she had told me it was real, and knowing it was real on both sides made the carrying of it harder rather than easier. The way a wound is more painful once you acknowledge it than when you were pretending it wasn't there. I went to see her on a Tuesday morning in September when I knew Robert was on a run east. I am not going to dress this up. I knew he was gone, and I went anyway, which was the least decent thing I did in this whole story. She opened the door and she looked at me, and she did not say come in, but she did not close the door either, and we stood in the doorway of her house with the September morning around us, and I told her the truth. I told her that I had been trying to carry this like something manageable, and that it was not manageable, and that I was not going to do anything about it and was not asking her to do anything about it, but that I needed her to know that what I felt was real, and that I was not going to pretend otherwise to myself, even if I had to pretend otherwise to everyone else. She listened to all of it without moving. Then she stepped out onto the porch, and she closed the door behind her, and she stood in front of me, and she put her hand against my face, and she looked at me for a long time without saying anything, and I stood very still because her hand on my face was the most significant thing anyone had touched me with in years, and I understood in that moment the full size of what we were both not going to do, and why not doing it was costing both of us what it was costing us. She said, "I know. I have known since April." I said, "I am sorry." She said, "Don't be. Some things are worth knowing even when you can't have them." And then she kissed me. Once, briefly, with the full weight of everything behind it. Not the beginning of something. Not a promise. Not a door opening. The acknowledgement of something real between two people who had chosen not to let it damage anyone. Her hands on my face and mine on hers, and the September morning around us, and the blue door of her house behind her, and the flat Texas land in every direction as far as you could see. One kiss that lasted maybe 5 seconds and contained 15 years of carrying something honestly. Then she stepped back. She looked at me with those warm brown eyes, and she said, "You should go now, Will." I said, "I know." She said, "Take care of yourself." I said, "You too, Ada." And I walked back to my horse, and I got on, and I rode back toward the east side of Marfa. And I did not look back because looking back was not going to help anything, and because she deserved better than to be watched leaving, and because some things you have to let be finished when they are finished. Robert and Ada Caswell left Marfa in the spring of 1881. His freight operation had grown enough to warrant moving to a larger town with better road access, and they packed up the house with the blue door and moved east toward San Antonio, and that was the end of it. She came to say goodbye at the general store on the last day, which surprised me, and we shook hands the way people shake hands in front of witnesses, and she looked at me and I looked at her, and everything that needed to be said had already been said on a Tuesday morning in September. And so we said the ordinary things: safe travels, good luck, take care, and she left. I stood in the general store for a while after she was gone. The store owner asked me something about coffee, and I answered him and walked out and got on my horse and rode home, and the riding home was the longest ride I have ever taken. I stayed in Marfa. I built the cattle operation into something larger, Eventually, over the years, 80 acres, then 110, a herd that was respectable, and a name in Presidio County that stood for solid work and straight dealing. I married a woman named Ellen in 1884, who was good and kind, and who I loved in the steady, honest way that a man loves when he has learned what love is and what it demands of you, and we had a life together that was real and warm and full of the things that matter. I was not carrying Ada instead of loving Ellen. I want to be clear about that. The love I had for my wife was its own complete thing, not a substitute for something else, not a lesser version of the real thing. It was the real thing, just a different shape of it. But there is a room in me that has had Ada's name on it since April of 1880, and always will. Not a room I live in. Just a room that is there, that I walk past sometimes and acknowledge and keep walking, keep. A room that holds the memory of what it felt like to meet someone who made the world larger by being in it, and the particular bittersweet honor of having loved someone well enough to leave them alone. She taught me something I did not know before I met her, something that has been useful in the 15 years since. She taught me that love is not always about having. Sometimes it is about recognizing, about seeing someone clearly and being seen by them, and understanding that the seeing itself is a gift, separate from what you do with it, and that the most decent thing you can do with a gift you cannot keep is to receive it honestly and be grateful for it and let it make you better. I am better. I have been better since that Tuesday morning in September 1880. Not happy in the easy, uncomplicated way of a man who has gotten everything he wanted, but better, more honest, more attentive, more careful with the people in my life, more grateful for the things I have instead of reaching past them toward things I cannot hold. That is what she gave me. And I have been carrying it with everything I have. The way she told me some things are worth carrying, since the day she stepped back from that blue door and told me to go. I went. I have never fully stopped standing there. Ada Caswell lived in San Antonio until 1903. She had 3 children and by all accounts a good life. Will Hart ran his cattle operation in Presidio County until 1911. They never saw each other again after the spring of 1881. Some things do not need an ending to be complete.